2.3D. Now we're going to do some different types of problems. They're just going to be little word problems that you're going to see in your homework as well. We have a car odometer that tells you how much your car has been driven. Okay, at the beginning of the trip, car odometer at the beginning of the trip is 17,000 miles. So it's a relatively new car. Okay, 2 hours later, the odometer reads 17,192. So it's got 192 miles. All right. Let's put this down in points. We know we're talking about time in miles. Okay, so when time is 0, the odometer is 17,000 miles. And when the time is 2 hours later, we have 17,192. Okay. So what does this represent? F of 2 minus f of 0. F of 2 minus f of 0. Well, f of 2 is 17,192. F of 0 is 17,000, and that just equals 192. So that means we went 192 miles. That's what it represents. The distance traveled in 2 hours. Distance traveled in 2 hours. That's what f of 2 minus f of 0 represent. Okay, now what does f of 2 minus f of 0 all over 2 minus 0 represent? Okay, well, let's do it. We know this equals 192. That is in miles. And this represents 2, which is in hours. And this comes out to be 96. And it's a rate, miles per hour. So what does it represent? The average speed the car is traveling. The average speed the car is traveling. Okay, let's do another one. We have 2 more and we're done with 2.3. Okay, so here's another example. Draw this with me. We're going to throw a rock off a cliff that's 144 feet high. So this is feet over here. Okay, and we're going to make seconds the time on the horizontal axis. Okay, so here we have 0, 1, 2 seconds. Okay, all right, so let's say that we drop a rock. We just throw it off the edge of the cliff, and it's going to go something like this, and it lands. Okay, so this right here signifies that the rock has dropped off the cliff or been thrown. Okay. All right. Now the equation for this little line right here is S of t equals 144 minus 16t squared. All right. So what would S of 2 minus S of 0 represent? Okay. S of 2 minus F of 0 represent. Well, we're going to put a 2 in here, and then we put a 0 in there, right? And we end up with minus 64 feet. S of 2 minus S of 0. Okay, so we're looking at S of 2 would be right here. S of 0 would be right here. S of 2, S of 0. So right here, this represents the distance of how far the rock dropped, and that's 64 feet. Okay, 64 feet, that's what it represents. Now, we would say it's the displacement of the rock. The displacement of the rock during the first 2 seconds. The displacement of the rock during the first 2 seconds. That's what this represents, okay? Now in WebAssign, they call it disposition. So displacement in WebAssign, just so you know so you're not confused, is disposition. Okay, so that's what you'll see in WebAssign, that word. Okay, so now what would this equal? S of 2 minus S of 0 over 2 minus 0. Okay, so we have negative 64 is S of 2 minus S of 0, and 2 minus 0 is 2. And that equals negative 32. Now, negative 32 what? Well, we said this was feet, right? Feet, and this right here was time in seconds, feet per second. So what does this represent? It represents the average velocity. Average velocity. Okay. The average speed is 32 feet per second that the rock is falling. I'll go ahead and write that. The average speed the rock is falling is 32 feet per second. So that's what we call the velocity. Okay, one more problem. Now we had talked about future value compounding previously in our review, okay? So remember future value compounding formula. A of t equals p, we called it p naught, which is fine, 1 plus r over n to the nt, where p was principal, r was the rate, n was compounding period, and t was time. Okay? All right, so here's an example. Remember, t is in years. So we're going to invest $3,000. Invest $3,000. That pays all right, interest at a rate at an annual rate of 5% compounded quarterly. I'll reread that right now. Invest $3,000 that pays interest at an annual rate of 5% compounded quarterly. All right, so here's your type of homework question. Find A of 2 minus A of 0. Okay, so we'd have to put 2 into our equation and then 0 to our equation. So A of 2 we would put into here, and we have 3,000, and after doing all that work we have 1.0125. Okay, after putting n equals 4 and doing all that, this is what we end up with. Okay, and that ends up to be $3,313.46. A sub 0 is going to be the 3,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. 1.0125 to the power of nt, which is 4 times 2. Sorry about that. So inside to the power of nt, there's nt, and it comes out to be this number. All right, so now we're going to do where we have 0, okay? So again, we have 1.0125, but now there's going to be a 0 up here, because time is 0. So time is 0. 0 times anything is 0. Now that's just 1, right? And it makes sense, because in time is 0, we had initial $3,000. Okay? All right. So A2 minus A0 is going to be the difference of these two. We're just going to subtract them. Okay, we get 313.46. $313.46. Now, what does this represent? So they're going to ask you, what does this represent in words? It represents the interest made in 2 years. Interest made in 2 years. Okay, so next one. What does this represent? We're going to find out what it is and what it represents. Okay, we know the answer here is 313.46. 2 minus 0 is 2. And that comes out to be $156.73 per year. So we say on average, we're earning $156.73 per year.